Everybody, my name is Quinn Johnson, and I'm happy and grateful that Mrs. Densley asked me to talk to you a little bit about what I do. I'm just going to give you a really quick run through of what my career path has been, and then just share some of my insights from working in the video game industry. So I'll just jump right into it. So ever since I was a kid, I always knew what I wanted to do. I've always had a really creative mind, and I always knew that I wanted to write and draw for the entertainment industry. So comic books, video games, all that stuff is stuff that I just absolutely have always loved and poured my whole heart into. So when I was in grade school, my parents got me uh, sketchbooks and stuff. So I would fill them up with, I don't know how well you can see this, but I'd fill them up with all sorts of like concepts for video games. A lot of this is how old I am, but this was back in the era of the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. So that was kind of where I set my sights. So hopefully some of you have actually heard of these things. But you can see like I just had like all these concepts of like, okay, so this is what his attack's going to be. It's going to look like this, or this on the screen and all this other stuff. Obviously, video games have advanced way beyond all that since then. But I always just had that mind of this is what it would look like, and this is where it's going to go, and so it was really a lot of concept design, and then story as well, because I'm a writer. Storytelling is probably my number one skill set, I guess you could say, and so a lot of my stuff has been focused on that. So because I knew this is what I loved, as I continued to go through classes in junior high, high school, college, I continued to take a lot of art classes, a lot of creative writing classes. And then I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, which was awesome. And they have a whole major. One of their art majors is called sequential art, which is basically the study of comic book storytelling, or video game storytelling, or a lot of it would lend itself to animation. So basically, telling stories using visual media in a lot of ways. And so I took tons of awesome classes there. I'll just show you some other stuff. I took some concept design classes, which again is a lot of what I do now, where I just would come up with characters and storylines and props and basically just concepts of what these games or stories or comic books would look like. And we had all these various exercises. Sorry, I'm trying to align this with the camera. We had all these various exercises to help us to kind of really flesh out what this concept would be, so it would lend itself to actually, could be basically these were documents, so to speak, that could lend themselves to a finished product theoretically, and so it really helped us to think on all those things. So after I graduated, I continued to write. I continued to work on my art. Interesting thing was I realized while I was at SCAD. And I've always been a pretty good artist. I drew like all the time, all growing up. But when I got to SCAD and I had been there for a while, I realized that there were other artists, there were other students there who were way better artists than I was. And I always grew up thinking, yeah, I'm a pretty good artist, and people would be like, oh, you're a good artist. But there were people that were just amazing. And by the time I got to college, it was like, the mindset changed from this is just something you can do for fun to you have to be professional quality now. Like you have to be good enough that you can compete with other professionals out there. And I realized I got to this point where it just became too cumbersome for me to get what was in my brain and put it on the page and make it look as polished and as awesome and as good as I wanted. But what I still loved the most was the storytelling aspect. So one of the great blessings that came from going to SCAD, and I still got good grades. I still did, good work in my own humble opinion. But one of the great blessings that came from going to SCAD was I I've learned all these concepts that even if I wasn't myself doing the finished professional artwork, I thought like an artist, and I knew what I wanted. I knew I had the knowledge and the background and the perspective of what worked, what didn't work, and so it basically helped me to start collaborating with artists. So I would be the main storyteller. I'd come up with the story, I'd come up with the concepts, and then I'd work with these artists that could help bring my vision to life. And of course, when you collaborate, it's not just you controlling everything typically, but it's the other people on your team that you are collaborating with who are also bringing their ideas, their fresh spin on your concepts. And so you really work well together to be like, oh man, there are lots of times that I've been working with artist friends who are like, who come up with the concept design, or they take what I had written and spin it in a certain way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so much cooler than what I was even originally thinking. So it's this really cool creative environment. So that was a great blessing. And one of the greatest awesome things that came from me going to SCAD was actually through church, and then also we had a bunch of classes together. I met one of my best friends. His name is Robert Atkins. He's been and he's a professional comic book artist, and he's been a professional comic book artist ever since he graduated. So 20 years almost, which is terrifying to think about. I had my own comic book story that I had the first idea for in 9th grade, called Elders of the Runestone, and this was like my baby. This is like my big epic story that I had been developing my whole life and planned my whole life to draw as well as write. And so once I was at SCAD with Robert, I said, hey, this has been my dream project and my big epic story that I've always wanted to do, and would you like to be my partner on it? Because not only were we super good friends, but we worked really well together. And he's like, yeah, he's like, actually, he doesn't consider himself a good writer, coming up with the actual story, but he loves collaborating with writers and making it all look amazing. So it was perfect for us. And so ever since we graduated from SCAD, we've been partners on this comic book. In addition, we've both been working on separate projects for other companies and doing other things, but this has been like the big project that we've been working on together. And so the fact that I went to SCAD, even though I didn't come out of SCAD as a full-on artist like I was planning, it all worked out because we met each other and we've been able to collaborate. And then there's been other friends that I went to SCAD with, where we've been able to network and connect and work on projects together and stuff like that. So it's been an awesome blessing. So then as my after I graduated from from SCAD, I continued to develop my skills. Honestly, I took jobs that had nothing to do with art or writing because I needed to pay the bills. And it's hard, sometimes after you graduate, you once you graduate college, you're kind of like at the point where you're like, okay, I have to make something of myself now. Like the next step isn't laid out for me. It's like I have to kind of figure out what this next step in my life is going to be. So, and so it took a few years of me just working on my own stuff for a while, on my own time, and then working at offices and whatnot to pay the bills, which was fine. I still had great experiences there and learned a lot. But then I've always been a huge, huge, huge fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And ever since I was a kid and I discovered the original black and white Mirage comics, they were from Mirage Publishing, where the Turtles started out as a comic book. I don't know if you knew that. It blew my mind. So I have always loved the Ninja Turtles. And I always had this dream when I read these old comic books. I was like, oh my gosh, these are amazing. And they are. They're really, really good if you can find them. They're really awesome. Great stories, great characters, awesome art. And I always had this dream to write for the Ninja Turtles comic book. And so now that I was graduated, I was working on stuff, and then I saw there was the first comic convention in New York City ever was gonna happen. This is like 2006. And I just saw that one of the co-creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Peter Laird, that he was going to be there. And I thought, oh man, what a dream come true it would be to just meet him. And so I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm just going to take a chance. I'm going to do something wild and crazy, and I'm going to go fly to New York. And I wasn't rich or anything, but I was like, I'm going to pay the price to go and fulfill this lifelong dream and meet him. And then I thought, if I'm going to go through all this effort and pay all this money for plane tickets and hotel and everything in New York, which was a new experience for me, I might as well write a comic book script for the Ninja Turtles and pitch it to him. See what he says. The worst thing he can say is no, and I'll just be right where I am now. So anyway, long story short, I went to the convention, talked to him. He was super awesome. I pitched him the script idea that I had, which I actually had brought a copy of the script with me, and this is back before we have all the technology we do now. But I had like a CD that had the full script on it and artwork and everything. And I actually had my friend Robert. He was kind enough to do some concept art for me. And so I showed that off, and they sent me an email like a week later, said, "Hey, yeah, let's do this. We want to do this." So my first professional career thing, project was to write a script for the Ninja Turtles comic book. And then after that, and here's the Ninja Turtles comic book. It was all about Casey Jones, their friend, that's a vigilante that wears a hockey mask, and he's one of my favorite characters, so that was awesome. And then as time went on, that once I got my foot in the door with that led to me doing other comic books for like Kung Fu Panda and other stuff, which was just an awesome dream come true. So the reason I share all this with you, I know this isn't specifically on video games, but it was all these building blocks that led, or these stepping stones that led to also working in video games, which was my other big dream. My younger brother Troy has also been like, we're super close friends, and we're both into the same things. And he's super creative, and so he'd always also had a dream to work in video games. And he actually went to the University of Utah, where we both are from Utah, and they have an amazing video game program, one of the top ones in the nation. And so he graduated. He went to that program and learned how to do game directing and basically being basically like a movie director, where you're working with lots of other groups of people who all have specific responsibilities. But it was for video games, and so he really focused on that. So that was his major course of study. A long story short, he ended up getting a job with Disney, had a video game studio in Salt Lake City. And they did you may remember the Disney Infinity games there were 3 games in the series that were amazing. They were toys to life video games, which basically they had these figures, these physical figures that they made. Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars characters, and which the figures themselves were super cool. But then you'd put them on a base and you'd play as the character in the game. And so he got a job working there, and then after he'd been there for a little bit, he clued me in on some opportunities, some openings, some career openings that were there. And long story short, I also ended up working there, which was awesome because I got to work with my brother. And so I became a storyteller / level designer for Disney Infinity. I would build levels, and Disney Infinity basically had 2 main modes that comprised it. One was basically the campaign mode, where you'd play through a Pirates of the Caribbean whole mode, story and levels and everything that was very specific to pirates, and you could only play as pirates characters. And then the other half was called the toy box, where it was just like, this is free for all. You can use any of the characters you want. You can mix and match. And then there was a whole level builder, a really, really deep, robust level building, platform where fans at home, people at home playing the game, could just take all these assets from all these different, Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel worlds, and physically build whatever levels they wanted. And then as part of that, you could, there was some text editing, so you could add stories and things that would pop up to tell the story. There was lots of logic tools where you could do really cool logic stuff, basically programming, but in a very user-friendly way. And so people could just do that. And so I was on a special team where we built levels, and that was just our job. We used the same tools that people at home could use who were playing the game, but that was our full-time job. So we were building these levels and really, really basically showed people out there what this level building mode was capable of, where you could really build some massive, epic, deep, complicated, super awesome levels. And so anyway, that's what I did. And my emphasis was on building the levels and then also on the storytelling. So I did a lot of story with it. I actually ended up working on other aspects of the game outside of the toy box. So I got pulled in to work on some story elements of some other parts of the game, which was really cool. I actually got to, and then because I, was established in the company, that opened up lots of other opportunities in the game. Such as I got to sit down with my brother Troy, who had some responsibilities to come up with all the combat moves, like the move sets of some of the characters. So he and I actually sat down in an office and came up with all these cool ideas of like what the Tron characters' moves would be. We came up with all the moves for Vision from Avengers, and just like calling, remember that part in the movie where they did this? We could incorporate that into his block or his flying move or whatever. And so we got to do that, which was really cool. One of the other things that I got to do that was really cool was again, I was on the level building team, and I talked to Troy and I said, hey, I just noticed that there's not a whole lot of sound effects that players can, as they're doing this simple programming, they can say, like, when I open this door, then this specific sound effect will play if it's a cow mooing or a electronic buzzing or something like that. And I said, there's not a very big list of sound effects that people can choose from. So he's like, well, we still have a little bit of time before the game has to be like done. So if you want to come up with a list of sound effects you think would be good and that people would enjoy who are playing the game, put it together and make a priority list of which ones are like must-haves and which ones are nice-to-haves if we have time, and then we'll talk to the sound effect guys, the audio guys in the company, and see what we can do. And as a result, they ended up adding it was like 300 new sound effects just because I had said, I think this would be cool if there's bandwidth for it. So it was cool, and fans loved it. So it's not something I kind of like. I'm proud of. It's something that I got to be a part of just because it was something that I noticed was a need and something I was excited and passionate about, that there was an opportunity and I was able to go in and do it. So I'll just share a couple of the things that I've learned from working in the video game industry that I think might be helpful to you. One that I mentioned before is collaboration is huge. I had kind of a wake-up call. This is one of those like mistakes that you learn from that I'm so grateful for. That it's so important to not just be focused on yourself and what I want to do, but to really focus on, hey, I'm on a team. We're working together. What do we all have to contribute? Leave your ego at the door. There was a level that I made that I was like, this is going to be so so innovative, and it was really innovative, and I built on some principles that some other people on my team had figured out these amazing ways to do things that the game wasn't really designed to do. So I built on that and built this really hard game, in the toy box, in the level builder, and we'd release these levels for free download, so people could just play these levels that we as official Disney studio people had made. People could play them at home, and every time I had somebody else come in and play this game to test it, everyone's like, this is too hard. It's just frustrating. It's not really fun. It's just really, really hard. And I was like, well, I think it's fun, and it's supposed to be old school hard, and it's supposed to be this and this and this. And so I kept working on it and kind of ignored all the advice I was being given, and the level got released, and like nobody played it. Everybody who played it was so frustrated and hated it. and we did a peer review at one point, and one of the people on my team just said, Quinn's a super nice guy. He's very, creative. He's good at what he does. But if there's one thing that I think he can improve on, it's listening to other people and taking feedback with humility, is basically what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically was like, learning how to be a team player. And that was a big wake-up call. It's like, you know what? He's right. I need to do better at that and stop focusing so much on myself and focusing so much on like, well, this is I want this and I think it's fun and I'm going to do this, and more listen like what would be an enjoyable experience for others, because this game is really about, we were doing it for the fans and not just for me. And that totally changed my whole perspective, and so suddenly everything went from being, this is my level, this is my thing, this is my project. It's like, this is ours, we're all contributing, we all have something valuable to contribute. And that's continued with me to this day in the projects I work on now. Another thing that is important to remember is it's constantly a battle of, this is all the things that we would love to do, this is the time and the money that we have, these are the constraints we have to work through. What is possible? Where's the halfway point? Where can we meet? Where can we work together and really do what makes sense? Because at the end of the day, you want the game to be as cool as possible, but at the end of the day, the game has to get out on time. It has to get out on time. Otherwise, you've all heard stories of studios closing down because they just dragged out development. Dragged it out. The game never came out because they just wanted to keep on working on it, and then they just ran out of money and time, and the game just never came out, and it was unfinished, and and then everyone loses. So that's something to always keep in mind, and just realize, hey, there are forces that you're beholden to. What can you do, even with those limitations? What can you do to be creative and successful and make it the best version of itself within these limitations? And another thing that comes out of that is that it's possible with limitations. They say you don't have this big option that you would love to have. All you have is this. there's still some wonderful that can really stimulate your creativity and be like, wow, there's some really cool things that I could do that I wouldn't have thought of if I wouldn't have had these constraints, but you can still come up with something that's like a simpler solution that's still really, really cool. And the fact of the matter is, when the game comes out, you may have in your mind like all these ideas of like, these are all the cool things that were supposed to be in there, and that, we're so disappointed they didn't get in. But the people playing your game at home aren't going to be any the wiser. They're going to have no idea that was even thought, planned to be in there, or you want it to be in there, and they'll just be like, this is a cool game. I love it. So it doesn't matter ultimately. But in your mind that it was cool, and that's fine. Just another thing that I will just say, this applies to the video game industry, but also to every other industry. I mean, whatever you want to do in life, it just applies to life. One of my professors at SCAD shared a lesson with me or just a little group of us, that I thought was so profound, and it's always stuck with me. He said there's three main things that your future employers, your clients, your publisher or your video game studio or whatever, when they are looking to hire someone or to work with someone, these are the three main things that are important. The first one is obviously, does this person have the talent? Do they have the skills? Do they have the talent? Do they have the experience and the knowledge to be able to do a good job and do good artwork or programming or whatever it is? Can they do the job well? And that's the one that people tend to focus on the most and think is the most important. But the other two are equally as important. And the second one is this person dependable? Does this person have integrity? Can they take an assignment and get it done on time? Or are they going to just kind of be are they just going to, like, there were lots of people that at SCAD that would just never show up to class. They just wanted to sleep in and hang out at home at their apartment and never come to class. And I'm like, you guys are spending hundreds of dollars per day to be at this school, and you're not even showing up to class. You're not even doing your homework and getting your work in on time. So it's very important to employers, like, is this person dependable? Will they respond to emails when we're like, where are we at? This is what we need. This is the day we need it. Where are you on this? They need to be in touch. So how good are you at being dependable? And then the third thing is this person fun to work with? Are you a fun person to work with? Or are you a prima donna? Are you someone who's like, oh, well, I'm so good at what I do that I can be a jerk to other people, or I don't need to get my stuff in on time, or I can just, forget the editor or my supervisor, forget these constraints. I'm going to do what I want to do. And if I happen to answer your emails, then, you're good for you, but I don't, and so basically it's like, and this all comes down to, again, being really good at working on it as part of a team. Do you have that team player mindset? Because at the end of the day, your employers will be like, okay, we have this job that needs to be done. We could hire this person who's really, really good. They're the best, talent-wise, but they're not dependable. We never know if we're even going to hear from them. We never know if they're going to get their work in on time when we have these deadlines, and they're a jerk. No one wants to work with this person because they're such a pain to work with. Or we could go with this other person who's still good. They're not as good, but they're still really good. They get their work in on time, and they make people laugh. They're fun. They're nice to people. They're kind. They're humble. People enjoy working with them, and they make the team better as a whole. So let's go with this second person, because they're going to be so much better to work with overall. So those are just some of the things that I have learned. There's so many more things. So I hope this has been helpful. As you look at my website, my website is mrwonderfulproductions.com. That's just my personal website, where you'll see a bunch of the stuff that I've worked on. So there's a lot of comic book stuff in there. There's also the video games tab that you can go to, which has a bunch of videos just showing samples of levels that I built for Disney Infinity. So that's probably a place you want to go and check out some of the stuff I got to work on, and kind of see, and it has little notes to kind of say, this is what my creative process was. These are the cool things that I tried to innovate and do with these levels. So I hope that that's helpful to you. So I'm looking forward to what other questions you may have. There's always more to learn. I guess one other big lesson that I'll share with you really quick. Just be aware that the video game industry is famously a very volatile industry. Like, it is very typical, very normal for studios to close. I mean, it is what it is. You have to be willing to be, am I willing to be in an industry where things are never 100% guaranteed that I'm going to stay at this job. You know, there's always all these other factors. So just realize that in the video game industry, you most likely will work at several different studios through the course of your life. And just realize the stress that that may put on you, that may put on your future family. You know, you're dependent on this income. You know, you may be moving. It just depends. You know, and I've certainly gone through that. I've worked for several different video game studios. The Disney studio actually got closed down, which was a bummer. But I worked at some other places. I'm actually living in San Antonio now because Disney didn't end up working out in the long run, and now I'm working doing pinball, which is a whole other story. Pinball has lots of similarities to video games, but it's its own unique industry, which is still super awesome. Where I get to do basically game design, story, dialogue, all that other fun stuff, and I'm learning new skills with that. So I mean, just be aware that it takes a lot of adaptation. It takes a lot of holding on to your passion and doing what you love, and then being willing to make some sacrifices to bring in the money to care for your family as needed, and you just have to be flexible. So, but it's what I love. I absolutely love it. You know, it'd be hard for me to be happy doing something else, which I've done other jobs that brought in the money and they were fine and they were good experiences. But I know what I'm passionate about. I know what I love. I guess one other thing I just want to make sure I mention is that a huge kind of the central part of my whole career path has been my relationship with God, where I have kept him very involved in my life. I've prayed for direction. I've gotten all sorts of inspiration and ideas that would come to me that I felt were from him, that helped me to make these decisions, to have these successes and opportunities. And so I owe all these wonderful opportunities to my relationship with God and his guidance and kindness in my life. And so you know where you are at in your life and how you feel about things, but from my experience, that has been vital. And so I encourage you to look into that part of your life as well. So that's my last advice to you. So looking forward to your questions. Hope this was helpful, and I'll talk to you all soon.